So it has got to do with a lot of knowledge about a film. If the film is not well processed, of course, it's going to have impact on how we are going to interpret the image. And of course, since it is a system in which we got to maximize the resources we have, we don't necessarily want to have so many retakes because by doing that, not only are we overdosing our patient, we are also incurring um, some money, some expenses. So we need to know all these things. So today we want to look at the screen film radiography and the second subtopic we have to do with the film processing. In the early days, after Röntgen obtained the very famous radiograph of his wife's hand, which um, actually showed the ring with the bone of the fingers. Film radiography has gone through a lot of processes, a lot of development, and so on to what we have today. We can use ordinary film to obtain our image, just like in the olden days, in which they rubbed on a glass sheet, not a glass sheet. They just equipped it with some form of cellulose acetate, which acted as the film, and of course the glass base was just acted as the holder because it has to be on top of something. The film material has got to be on top of something. The cellulose acetate had, this metric, the material then was very flammable, so it led to so many fire disasters. And from there, we had to do some changes to the film material to what we have today, which is bromide, of course, not from bromine, can also have some iodine, so that we have, but basically, silver bromide, which forms over about 95% of the composition, and then silver iodide coming around 5% of the composition of the film. But film use alone, you still have some form of image, of course, some form of an image. If you use ordinary film alone, that is, you take your film without adding a screen, you still have some form of image. Of course, you're still going to get an image, just like images we have gotten in the olden days with film alone. And of course, the film alone gives a very good, very, very wonderful spatial resolution. Very, very wonderful one, spatial resolution. But it comes with the problem of light, problem of problem of absorption, or rather, problem of detection efficiency. If you have your photon, of course, a X-ray coming from your source, from the body after it has interacted with it, the ability of this beam to detect this X-ray beam, X-ray photon, is very, very small. Very, very small. It can have maybe 1 million photons coming. The detection of this one wouldn't be more than, say, 5% or even less than. So that is why we need to add a screen. Screen converts these X-ray photons into light photons. when an X-ray photons interact with a screen, you have an emission of light. The photon, the phosphor, the screen here now converts the light, after the wavelength, after the X-ray has interacted with it, you now have a light ray. You have a light rays being emitted in all manner of direction. So that gives us, so for one photon of X-ray, for one X-ray photon, you can have light photon of maybe 1,000,000, 100,000, and so on. So you can see just one photon of X-ray has given rise to about 1,000,000 photons of visible light. So because of that, screen increases the efficiency of the screen film system. It increases the efficiency of the X-ray beam that are falling on it. So with the introduction of a screen in radiography, we have the opportunity of using a little amount of exposure. For example, if we need a particular, if we want an optical density, we get to know that later, of 1 without film, with film alone, we might need up to maybe 50 mineral. But with the introduction of a screen, you wouldn't know, you might just have, you can reduce it to about 50 times. You can reduce the amount of radiation to that body by about 50 times, so that with the introduction of a screen, you just have something like 1 milliröntgen. You can see the essence of screen, of course, is to absorb the X-ray photon and then emit light, which is greatly multiplied. So it is a multiplicative factor. It is used for multiplication of the light beam. So before then, I think from the syllabus, we need to know some things about the magnification. Unless I forget, radiography is just a form of projection. Radiography, how do I put it? A screen film system is a form of projection, radiography, in the sense that one is projecting X-ray photons onto a body, and so on and so forth. It is different from what we have in nuclear medicine, which is emission radiography, in which the source is inside the body and then emitting a radiation outside. But for projection radiography, the source is outside the body, and then it is projecting its, or rather, it is directing its photon outside of the body to a detector. So projection radiography, of course, we have that in CT, we have that in MRI, and so on. All these ones are 3D, CT, MRI, because they give us 3D images. But what we have with our screen film radiography is a two-dimensional image, whereby we, of course, our body here, we have a patient here, The patient is a three-dimensional, of course, body. It's a three-dimensional body. But the whole image of this patient is going to be captured on the film, which is a two-dimensional object. So everything on this image, whatever it is, you can have your heart here, you can have your liver, and so on and so forth. They will be superimposed on each other. Of course, this problem has been solved with, of course, our CT, our MRI, and so on and so forth, even our ultrasound, which are three-dimensional in nature. Of course, ultrasound can also give us two-dimensional image, but we also have a three-dimensional version. So, screen film radiography is a two-dimensional image. So it suffers, it has the problem of um, that is overlap of structures. That's one of the problems that is occasioned with screen film radiography. Not just a screen film radiography, but also everything has got, even our digital radiography. We have the problem of superimposition of structure on one another. So we go to magnification. We know when a light rays, when X-rays leave the X-ray tube, X-rays, we have an X-ray tube. So, this is the window. This is the window. X-ray tube. If something continues to diverge, the X-ray beam continues to diverge even after passing through the patient. After passing through the patient, it continues to diverge up to when it hits the film, the screen film. Because of this divergence, we now have a magnification. So if you have your screen here, you are going to have a particular magnification factor. If you move your screen up, of course, maybe the screen is a piece. You move your table up and down, maybe towards the source, you're going to have another value of magnification. So magnification is simply, magnification M is simply the image and distance of object distance, I over O. Of course, we did that, we must have all done that in physics. The image distance over object distance, which is something as the image length over object length, and so on and so forth. So for our purpose here, magnification is just SOD over um, source to image distance, source to image distance, source to object. So our magnification is SID over SOD. This is the source over source image distance. This is our source. So this is our SID. This is the screen. The image will be captured here. So this is the SID. Then SOD is the source to object. This is our object. This is our source. And this is our SOD. So their magnification is just this distance over this distance. So, but for most magnification, most radiography processes, the patient, the screen is just as close as to the patient as possible, just to prevent the magnification. So the magnification will just be about 1. That is, SID and SOD will be approximately 1. That is done such that there won't be blurring, because the further you put the patient away from the screen, from the detector, which is a film, you're going to have M be greater than 1. And that is going to introduce blurring. That's one of the problems we have with magnification. As you continue to magnify a particular object, a particular image, you're going to introduce blurring so that some salient points will no longer be visible again. So this is one of the problems we have, one of the issues we have with the screen, with of course, a conventional radiography, because the beams diverge. Because they diverge, is going to introduce magnification. But as much as possible in screen film radiography, in fact, in conventional radiography, blurring is an issue. Because of that, the patient is always placed as close as possible to the detector. Of course, that is why on the tabletop exposition, we normally, the patient is on the table and the detector is as close to the patient as possible, except for chest and radiograph, in which the the source the source is just a little bit away from the the patient, because for obvious reason, mainly because of to use an air gap there, which reduces scatter as much as possible, because we are directing it to very radio sensitive parts of the body, the chest, which in which some of the radiation will also fall on, of course, from the back, fall on the thyroid and so on and so forth. So we want to reduce as much as possible the radiation as a result of a scatter. We want to continue with our screen film system. As you look at some of the terms we have, like we said, it consists of the screen film consists of the cassette, in which we always slot our film inside. Of course, normally usually done inside the dark room. Then one or more intensifying screen, depending on what we are doing. For some specialties like mammography, mammography uses one screen system, whereas other forms of radiography use two screen system. You quickly gets image of that. I hope you can see that this is a cross section of a radiographic screen film system. This is a conventional screen film in which you have two intensifying screens. We have one intensifying screen here. We have the other intensifying screen here. And we have, of course, this is a film emotion, the film emotion. Then the middle here is made up of at the base, which actually helps the film to be studied, makes the film studied. At least it doesn't just run for. So this is just a cross section of the film. Assuming we are talking about we want a dedicated mammographic film, then this other down layer will be absent. Will not be left with just the film base, the motion, the testifying screen, then of course the preset which holds at the film. So, but for every other radiography system, we have a system of two intensifying screen. The two intensifying screen are there just to help with a better light conversion. Because some, even as some X-rays begin to come down from here, some will hit here, they will hit this intensifying screen here, and they will be converted to light. They are converted to light. The film emotion here is there to capture, to undergo, of course, some process of releasing electron from the silver ion. I mean, from the silver bromide ion. We get to do that. We get into the details of that later. Then some of these cation, I mean, some X-ray, we pass through the whole of this and get to this other intensifying screen. When they strike here, because they move back, depending anyway, depending on this film. Some actually don't cross over. You have a crossover. I mean, anti-crossover emotion here. We'll get to that later. So this is just the cross section of a radiographic film. You have the cassette, you have the intensifying screen, the film emulsion, which is the film itself, the actual film itself, and that. So we have so many films. We have so many types of film. The earliest one was I think calcium tungstate. Okay. Calcium tungstate. So this one has been in use for a very long time until cesium iodide came into the foray. In fact, today we don't make use of a calcium tungstate again, but to make use of so many rare earth elements. Rare, rare earth element screens because they have a very, very wonderful conversion efficiency. The conversion of efficiency of calcium tungstate is just about 5%. But the very wonderful one, I think gadolinium oxysulfide. Chemistry students, gadolinium oxysulfide has about the best conversion efficiency of 15. So this is the major one that is still in use today. It has a given this one has a given weight to it. So these are some of the um, screens chemical properties of a screen, or rather, some of the types of screen we have, starting from calcium tungstate to what we have. We also have some other elements like this lanthanum, bromide, and so on and so forth. But the aluminum oxysulfide is about the best because of its very wonderful conversion efficiency. So the function of screen, like we've been told before, like we know, is just to absorb the X-ray and emit a visible light, which is seriously enhanced and magnified. So the properties of screen for screen, there are two properties of screen which we shall look into. How would you say this screen is better than this other screen? First of two is you have the what we call absorption efficiency and then conversion conversion efficiency. Absorption efficiency at times is ruled by the term quantum emission efficiency. Quantum QED, a quantum detection efficiency. Sorry, QDE, QDE, quantum detection efficiency. So a screen is basically um, known or basically graded according to these two formula. I mean these two terms. How good, how well does it absorb the X-ray photon? The X-ray photon, and how well does it convert the X-ray photon to light photon? So we are going to grade and screen um, through these two terms. How well does it absorb the quantum rays of the X-ray? And then secondly, how well can it convert the X-ray into light rays? So these two have to be present in a particular screen for you to say such a screen is an excellent for screen film radiography. And of course, gadolinium oxysulfide offers a very good absorption efficiency and a very good conversion efficiency. Let me quickly, for this one, for you to have a good absorption efficiency, QDE, we begin to differentiate between a thick film, a thick screen and a thin screen. You can have a screen as thick as this and have another one not as thick. The two of them will have different absorption efficiency. I think the ability to absorb X-ray photons. This one has a better absorption efficiency than this because the interaction of the X-ray photons will occur many times on this because of the larger surface area. But with this, the absorption of the absorption of the photon won't be as efficient as this one. But there's a problem with this. This one is not going to give us a very good and spatial resolution. But this one will give us a better spatial resolution because of its smaller, its antenna size. Of course, this is the same with almost every imaging modality. Thicker the finite element, the better spatial resolution. So it is not different here. This thicker one, though it has a better absorption efficiency, but it is going to have a very, very bad spatial resolution. So it's a kind of trying to have make a compromise between making the screen thick and then making it thin. If you want a very good and spatial resolution, you go for a thinner screen. And of course, this one also has its application in mammography. And because in mammography, we actually want detail. That is why in mammography screen film system, they are actually manufactured using a very, very thin screen. So conversion efficiency is actually inherent in any particular screen. So it is not something one can easily measure. It is inherent in a particular screen. So some screen can have a very good conversion efficiency. That is, if a photon of X-ray falls on it, how much amount of light photon can be um, can be generated from it. It doesn't have any bearing on whether the screen is thick or not. The only bearing on thickness has got to do with the absorption efficiency. We get to quantum detection efficiency much later when we begin to talk about image and quality. But for now, I think this should be enough. I think also have, okay.
Sorry, can you just go over that absorption efficiency? I didn't get that.
Okay. So for screen absorption efficiency. As for the screen, the rating of a screen is based on these two factors, these two efficiencies, the absorption efficiency, the conversion efficiency. This one is very quantum detection efficiency also. Absorption efficiency is the ability of a screen to absorb X-ray photon. We have so many thousands, millions of X-ray photons falling on the screen. But the ability of that screen to absorb the X-ray photon, we now characterize it as having a very good absorption efficiency than another screen. Absorption efficiency is just the ability, is the efficiency, or rather is the rate of quantifying the number of photons, X-ray photons that a particular screen can absorb. Because every photon, every X-ray photon falling on the screen is not going to be absorbed by that particular screen. Some will pass without being absorbed and continue moving. to, of course, maybe to the screen, I mean, to the emotion, but some will pass and be absorbed. And now, even after being absorbed, it doesn't mean that they will be converted to light and photons, because the ability to convert to light photons has got to do with a photoelectric and um, what's it called, the Compton scattering effect, which is a photoelectric. Of course, they begin to have so many of those transition from one shape to the other. Those are actually the things that give us the light rays. So the absorption efficiency is the ability. Excuse me, let me mute this one. So the absorption efficiency is the ability of this particular screen to absorb the X-ray photons falling on it. And like I said, it is not all the the X-ray photons falling on it that will be absorbed. Some will pass undetected, will be absorbed, but others will be absorbed. And the number that will absorb will actually give us the number that will be converted. Those that pass through wouldn't be able to contribute to the conversion efficiency, but only those that have been absorbed by this screen. Maybe out of 1 million, 10 raised to power 6, around 10 raised to power 3 photons were absorbed. Out of this 10 raised to power 3, a particular percentage of this 10 raised to power 3 will now be used conversion into light and photons, which will be greatly magnified. So conversion absorption efficiency is actually the ability of the screen to absorb the X-ray photon falling on it. So the rate at which it absorbs the X-ray photon falling on it is termed the absorption efficiency of such a screen. I don't know whether I made. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me share a particular screen once again on this. We can see three types of screen. We have calcium tungstate, we have yttrium tantalate, we have gadolinium oxysulfide. They have, of course, gadolinium oxysulfide has the greatest quantum detection efficiency, that is, the absorption efficiency at at any type of screen thickness. But the point there is that for each of them, as the thickness increases, the quantum detection efficiency also increases. So that is typical for all screens, but at the penalty of spatial resolution. As the screen thickness increases, the spatial resolution decreases. So also have the screens used in radiography can either be double or single. Like I said, the ones that use double screens are for most general radiography, whereas the ones that use a single screen are the ones in which you want a very good detail, especially in terms of the spatial resolution. So in mammography, this is usually of choice in mammography. A screen film system in which the screen is single is employed in mammography. So I want to look at some qualities of a good reflector. There are some things that a good screen. For a screen film system, there are so many materials we have in the screen to make the screen film system as good as possible, because we want, in as much as um, the screen is there, we want to introduce some other things that will enhance the function of that screen film arrangement. And some of these things could be in form of reflector and anti crossover material, especially for the screen that are double. We want to avoid anti-crossover, anti-crossing from one particular section of the screen, of the screen film system to another. We also want to have a reflector so that even as the light rays, because after the X-ray photon has interacted with the screen, you have now begin to have a light scattered in all manner of direction. But to increase the efficiency of this light, but this one traveling this way, the emotion is maybe somewhere around here. This one moving off this angle, this scattered back, would not contribute to the image. But we want to have as many light photons as possible so that we have a better image quality. So in that case, we want to introduce a reflector around this area, around up here, so that any light striking here will be directed down. Any light striking here will be directed down. Let me quickly show us the screen also about that. Reflector. Okay, screen with reflector. You can see the image we have here. We have a light photon without, an X-ray photon hitting a particular screen here. We now have the light scattered in all manner of position isotropically in all direction. But to prevent the loss of information, we need to introduce a reflector around here, so that the only light photons that will be lost are the ones that are reflected, travel, and are scattered along this direction. But every other one scattered up at an angle, meeting this will now come down. So that will give us a better image, because all these light photons will not be used in forming the image. We also want to look at the cross, the anti-cross. Also want to look at the screen and the anti-crossover material. We have the phosphor here, which is the screen, the material of the screen. Um, After interaction of the X-ray, we have so many light photons crossing over this first emotion. They have interacted with this emotion, of course, causing some latent image here, a latent image. But after that, so many of them still cross over to this film here. But we actually don't want that. So inside this base, anti-crossover layer has to be provided just to stop the light photon from getting into these emotion. So that one is actually, you said the crossover can be decreased by placing a light absorbing layer between the film emotion and the film base, and so on and so forth. So this is also one of the material that has to be introduced into a screen to improve its efficiency. And at times you can also have a light dye, a light dye here, around here, so that every light photon will be attracted towards it, and there wouldn't be scattering of the light that has been produced by interaction of the X-ray with the film. I mean, with the phosphor, which is actually the screen. That's absorbing dye. So, I want to look at the noise effects and noise effects of this absorption efficiency. Noise effect of changing. I want to look at the noise effects when we change the absorption efficiency, or it will improve the absorption efficiency of a screen. And I also want to look at the effect of noise when we maybe increase or decrease the conversion efficiency of a screen. Because we need to know at this point what noise is. A noise is actually the it has to do with the number of X-ray photons or light photons that has been used to form an image. If you have so many light photons or X-ray photons that we use in forming an image, that particular image will have a lower noise. But if you have lesser X-ray photons used in forming a particular image, of course, we are going to have a very, very grainy image. Of course, that means we are going to have so much noise. So in terms of SNR or even CNR, SNR, we are going to have a low SNR, signal to noise ratio. We are going to have it a very low one. So what is the effect of changing the absorption efficiency vis-a-vis changing the conversion efficiency? Like we have told before, absorption efficiency has got to do with the thickness, of course, has a lot to do with the thickness of the film. How much, how much X-ray quanta can be converted. How many X-ray photons can actually be converted? I mean, can actually be absorbed. How does it relate to the noise? And for conversion efficiency, of course, how much of this can we use? Can we convert to? Um, can we use in equating noise? What do I mean? You have a noise. Noise has got to do with the number of photons used in forming an image. So when we look at it based on the conversion efficiency, how does the noise change? Is the noise going to be greater when we increase the absorption efficiency of a screen, or is it going to be lower? We also want to look at the effect of noise on the conversion efficiency. If we increase the conversion efficiency, how is it going to affect the noise? Is the noise going to increase or decrease? So we just look at this, for example. We have two photons here. You have two photons absorbed here. Or within thin screen, we have just one photon absorbed. Two, of course. Let's say this has 20% absorption efficiency, and this one has a 10% absorption efficiency. The this one with this one we make use of more X-ray photons. Why? Because we have two X-ray photons that have been used to form image. This one just one X-ray photons. These values are just hypothetical. They are not real values. So it means this one has we've used a more number of X-ray photons in forming an image, whereas this one is going to use just one. So because of that, this one uses more than this. So this one will have a higher SNR, I mean a lower SNR. Or let me use a noise now. This one will have lower noise, whereas this one is going to have higher higher noise, because the number of photons that have been absorbed here, 2. The number of photons that have been absorbed here, 1. So the higher the QDE, the lower the noise we are going to have. That is the absorption efficiency. The higher the absorption efficiency, the higher the signal we are going to get from a particular exposure. That is, the lower the noise we are going to get. The lower the noise, the better the signal will be. But we want to look at the conversion efficiency. What has conversion efficiency got to do with the noise? Is it going to be increased or decreased we um, when we make changes to the conversion efficiency? Like in this one, a very, very good way of increasing the absorption efficiency is by making the crystals or the screen thinner. How do we how are we going to quantify the noise by changing the conversion efficiency for a particular screen? Of course, let's use the same. We have two screens that have a different conversion efficiency. This one, assuming we are looking at want to obtain an OD of 1, OD equal to 1. That is optical density equal to 1. That is our aim of the radiograph. The system already knows that it is looking for an OD equal to 1. What happens if this one has a smaller conversion efficiency? That is, it uses, um, how do I do this? How do I explain this? This one can actually convert 50% to obtain an OD of 1. But this one, for this one, which has the efficiency of this one, let's say it is 40%. 40%. But 40% can't give us an OD of 1. It will give us an optical density of less than 1. But because what the system has been set is to obtain an OD of 1. So what happens in this case is that for this system to have an OD of 1, the efficiency of this one has to be increased to 50%, which will give an OD of 1. I don't know whether I'm making sense. We have a particular system. This one has a better conversion efficiency, say 50%, which will actually give us an optical density of 1. But for this one, which is a 40% efficient, it is going to give us a particular image of a particular intensity. But that the 40% of this one is not going to give us an OD of 1. Maybe probably give us an OD of 0.8. But because an OD of 1 is what the image parameter has been set, it is not going to stop at that place. It's not going to stop there. What it will now actually automate this particular screen to increase the conversion efficiency to 50%. Of course, this is we are going to come in terms of speed, the sensitivity of a screen, whereby a particular screen uses a fewer number of light photons to form an image in which we call that a fast screen. We are going to come to that. So conversion, the thing we want to draw out here is that the conversion efficiency has no effect on the noise. If we change for a particular screen, if we change the conversion efficiency from a particular value to another value, the efficiency, the noise effect will still remain the same because the screen will either increase the ability will either increase the light forming photons to a higher value or reduce it to a lower value. So conversion efficiency has no bearing on noise of a particular film because automatically it will change it to a value that will give it an optical a preset optical density. You can say optical density of 2. If something doesn't reach 2, of course, the system won't be activated. It's only when the system has reached an optical density of 2 that the light rays will, that the system will now, the photo timer will now stop. Because actually these things, they happen with AEC, automatic exposure control. So if the optical density hasn't reached 2, the light photons that will be responsible for this exposure will still be on until it has reached an optical density of 2. Likewise, this, if we set it at optical density of 2, no matter how efficient this screen is, it will not stop until the optical density of that particular film has reached 2. So the conversion efficiency has got no effect the on the noise level of a particular image. I don't know whether I actually made sense there because at this I think at this topic we need to actually get it very well because at times I don't know. You might have questions there, and one might be thrown off balance. So the film characteristic have got to do with the composition of the film, the function of the film, and the principle involved. I think, let me see if I have, okay. I want to briefly look at the optical density, which is a very, very important parameter we always talk about in film. We have used this term OD at some points in this lecture, optical density. What is optical density? Optical density has got to do with the degree of darkening of the film. So the degree of darkening of the film is a measure of the optical density of a film. This is actually measured with a densitometer. OD is measured with a densitometer. It's actually a particular machine that has, machine this way. You have a slot here in which you put your film. This one has a light source here that shines on this film. And this one has a digital meter here. So when you shine a light on the film, maybe that has been exposed or not, is going to give you a particular value of reading. The reading it gives you is a measure of the optical density. Even if you put a new film here, a film that has not been exposed, it's actually going to give us a particular reading. Well, we get to that. We talk about the HD curve. So the densitometer is the material, the instrument used for measuring the optical density of a film. So optical density of a film is just the amount of darkening of a film, how much a film is darkened. If a film has undergone a lot of maybe a film, you use so many X-ray photon in on a film, it's going to give us some value of AD, maybe around 2 and so on and so forth. But if you use lighter photons, I mean not too energetic photon in to shine on the film, it's going to give you a particular a low range value of optical density. So before we get to the mathematics of optical density, we need to get to know what transmittance is all about. Transmittance of light has got to do with this ratio, and this intensity of light, intensity of light. Um, Intensity of light I not intensity without film, and this other one is an intensity with. So if you want to look at the transmission, how much light can be transmitted through, you have a film, want to know how much light can be transmitted through that film. Of course, the film must have been darkened with X-ray. It must have been exposed. But you want to know the amount of light that can pass through that film. Just use this formula, a transmittance, which is I. That is the intensity with film all over the intensity without film. So with that, we know the transmittance of the like use of transmitters. We actually want to know, we want to develop the formula for calculating the OD of a particular field. So it starts from here, transmittance. The amount of light a particular film can transmit is based on that particular film. The light it transmits all over the light it can transmit without them film. So if you just compare these two ratios, that is going to give us the transmittance of that film. So the optical density is actually related to this value, OD. OD is actually common logarithm of T. Common logarithm, not natural logarithm this time around. T. So optical density is the log negative of the log of this transmittance, the negative. So what the machine does for us, what the densitometer does for us is it calculates this value and gives us the answer in raw form, in 3. That is why in every material, in every film, you can actually have the number. The numbers are in positive values because of this negative one here. But this one is always going to give us negative values. Negative multiplied by this negative, we're going to have a positive value. So optical density for radiography energy range is from maybe around 1 to around 4.6. So the optical density is the negative logarithm of the transmittance. And from mathematics, this one should give us log t raised to power 1, which is what? Log 1 over t. Hence, we now have it to be this value 1 over I naught over I. Multiple density is negative t. This is continuous of t raised to minus 1. This is continuous of 1 over t, which is so if you have the value of the transmittance, if you have, at times you might not be given the transmittance, or you'll be given the light intensity without film. You're given the light intensity with film, and simply get the inverse of this. After getting transmittance, you get the inverse of the transmittance, and you now find the negative logarithm of it. Well, this is just the mathematics of it. So optical density is calculated using this in a densitometer. So why all this? We need all this because we can actually plot the value of optical density. You have, in particular, you have so many film for this experiment. You expose a film to maybe 1 milligray. You expose another that same type of film to 2 milligray, to 3 milligray, and so on and so forth, to various intensities of an X-ray. And at the end of the day, you want to plot the value of the optical density to the exposure. One is going to have a particular type of curve. Two scientists actually did a lot of work on that. Hutter and Rayfield. They did a lot of work on the comparison of the multiple density and exposure. Hutter and Rayfield. They did an extensive work on the curve that we now know today as a characteristic curve. This is optical density, whereas this is exposure. So for a fresh film, you take a fresh film now, you go to the densitometer, a fresh film that has not been exposed, you go to a densitometer, you look at it, of course you shine light on it, and it's going to give you a particular reading. It will never give you a reading of 0. The film, even as fresh as it is, will never give us a value of 0. Why? Because the film has what we call a base OD. It has a base OD, base optical density. Because of the way the film has been manufactured, but the film has got some dyes, and some dyes you have put inside the film. There are some material which emit color that have been put inside the film, and so on and so forth. All these will contribute to the OD not being equal to 1 for a freshly prepared or a freshly bought film. And that is 1. And the value 1 will have will range from 0.11 to around 0.15. As the base OD, the base optical density of a film will have a value from 0.11 to 0.15. That is on one hand. And again, when you have stored a film for some time, that's why it is actually advisable not to store a film for so long a time before it is used. Because if you store it for so long a time, you might have some form of exposure coming to the film after some time. That is why if you want to build a dark room where, of course, where some of these films are stored, it shouldn't be adjacent the radiography room, that is the exposure room. Even if it is opposite the exposure room, the adjoining walls, the wall separating the X-ray room and the dark room has got to be fortified with very, very dense material. So it can be lead, of course, you don't need to use lead. Concrete that has been well fortified so that X-rays wouldn't penetrate the wall and then expose the films at some point in time. So for films that have been stored after some time, it's going to have some kind of fog. It's going to have some kind of fog, and the fog is just as a result of the temperature, because temperature can actually affect the film in the sense that some, just like we have for in our readers, in our TLD readers. No, these are TLD readers. They are thermoluminescent dosimeters. When you heat them up, some light and the holes that have been trapped, the electrons that have been trapped in the holes will be released. Likewise for our film, when you bring them at a very high temperature, you are likely going to have light and release inside that film, which will then darken it to an extent, of course, and very, very minimal. So because of that, film also has some kind of fog level, and the fog level ranges from um, 0.11 to around 0. Anything, 0.0, 0.1 to around 0.18. Those are the acceptable limits of fog that must be present in the film. If the fog level now continues to around 0.2, if the fog level continues around 0.2 OZ, then that film has got to be discarded. You don't need to use that film any longer. Because if you develop that film, if you take it to expose, you use it for exposure, one is not going to have a very good quality radiograph. So such a film should be discarded. So because of that, one has to be very, very careful when consulting the data in which the film has stored. That is why the film is just always put inside the cassette in a very, very dark room, very, very dark room. And then when you want to remove, when the darkroom technicians want to remove that film also, it is also done inside the darkroom. And eventually, if they do it outside, of course, it is going to render the whole process useless, because a light ray will just go and then just expose them that film uniformly. It doesn't have a uniform type of gray. I have material. I cover want to. Let's see this diagram. The OD code. So this is the HD curve, the Houghton Rdiography curve, which is also known as the characteristic curve. Fine, so I want to call it the characteristic curve. It just gives us, it is the curve that tells us, that gives us the relationship between optical density, and it could be gamma, it could be dose, it could be exposure, as the case may be. I think this horizontal axis, it could be any of these. This just helps us to quantify the amount of radiation, the amount of exposure, as the case may be. So look at the toe here. The toe here, of course, you can see the graph will never start at 0. It starts at a particular value. For the base and fall, the value shouldn't be more than 0.2. The value of both the base and fall, 0.2 thereabouts, or 0.15 and 0.2. If around the 0.35, it shouldn't be more than that. The combination of those two. Then immediately increase the exposure. You now begin to have a linear region from this amount to this place until you now get to a maximum value in which further exposure wouldn't actually change the optical density of that thing. So at that point, you have the shoulder there. So the shoulder here tells us that we have reached the limit which the film can accommodate. So exposure along this area is useless, makes no meaning. But exposure also, of course, we don't have exposure around here. So the linear region in which a particular change in optical density will give us a corresponding change in the gamma or exposure or absorbent dose. Let me not use absorb dose or um, or dose. We're going to have we have a linear region. So the exposure is normally done within this linear region. Maybe for this particular graph, you have an exposure from 3 gamma, 3 microgray to around 30 microgray. Around 30 microgray, it is still you still have a good image. But anything beyond that, you're not going to have any good image at all. You might have at this side the whole thing might just be very, very dark. So this area should be avoided. So that is the characteristic curve for us. And the slope of the curve has got something to do with contrast. The slope of the curve has got something to do with contrast. How do I mean? If you have the slope of this graph, you can actually find the slope of this graph from knowledge of mathematics. Slope is just changing the y-axis. These are y-axis, changing the optical density axis, all over changing the exposure axis. And going to have the gradient. So the gradient of this curve tells us about the contrast. For a gradient that is steep, you are going to have a very good contrast. Compare it with a gradient. So if you have a gradient that comes out this way, that is, if you pick 2 points on this linear portion and you draw your gradient and draw your line between them, and it comes out this way, you're going to have a particular value of a gradient. Then on that same, if you have another curve, maybe another pin in which you have your gradient this way, you're going to have, you can see that this one is going to give us, a steep slope, steep slope or gradient. Whereas this one is not going to give us a steep slope. So this one will give us a better contrast than this. So the slope of the graph or the slope of the OD graph or the gradient of the OD graph gives us a measure of the contrast of that particular film. I think we should use that particular film to for a radiograph. We are going to get a better contrast between the structures that have been shown on that film. So, example, we want to use it for chest X-ray. We're going to have a very good contrast between the maybe the tenome and maybe the wall of the chest, or as the case may be. We're going to have a very good contrast there. Likewise, if you also use it, maybe you want to check the lungs and so on and so forth, along from every other, maybe from hearts and so on and so forth, you're going to have a very good contrast. But if you use another thing, in which the slope is like this, at the end of the day, you have a particular graph which you have to try your slope, and it's going to give us a lower slope because this one has been increased. This one has been seriously increased. So the slope is going to be lower. So the slope of the gradient of the OD curve gives us a kind of a measure of the contrast of a particular film. So let me quickly see if we have something in there. I think we should have. Well, I didn't see anything on that. One part that I forgot to tell us about the range of the OG of processes we use, of procedures we use in diagnostic radiology. They range from zero, which is not, of course, which doesn't exist. The OD from 0.11 to 3.6 max. That's the maximum OD for um, procedures we use in radiography. And if you need to have an OD greater than 3.6, then we are no longer in a medical radiography any longer. So this should be from around 0 to 3.6. We should have something like that. Screen HD cover optical density range. Well, we have something like that. That's not easily problem. So this just tells us about contrast from an OD curve. So we look at the sensitivity of a film, of a screen film. Sensitivity. Sensitivity of a film has got to do with the conversion efficiency of that film. Has got to do with the conversion efficiency of that film. Sensitivity of a film is what we normally know as the speed of a film. How much efficient is a film in converting the light photons? The X-ray photons into light photons. So that tells us the speed of a film. In the earlier days, normally have what we call 100 as the base um, for naming film. So any film that has a rating of more than 100, maybe you can say 200 film, speed film, 400 speed film, and so on and so forth. So the sensitivity of the film is actually the speed of the film. It tells us how much exposure is required to deliver a particular optical density. If you are looking at a one optical density, 1 OD or 2 OD, and that is specific on the HD curve. The HD curve, you're looking at OD of maybe 2.5, and you have two films. How much photons will be used to get an optical density of 2.5 OD? So if you have two films in which the first one used maybe 1 million light photons, light. Another one used maybe 10,000 light photon. The one that used 10,000 light photon has more speed than the one that used 1 million light photons, because this one used a lesser number of light photons to achieve the same optical density of a particular, the same optical density. At least I'm looking at the optical density of maybe 1.5 OD, and this one used 1 million, and this one used 10,000. This one has a better speed than this because it has used fewer light photons to achieve this same optical density of a film. We can also represent that on a particular on the OD curve, and that representation is in form of a shift of that OD curve to to the right. I mean, to the left, to the left or right. Okay, the shift of that OD curve signifies the change in speed of a particular film. I think I have that. Oh, optical density. Okay, okay. We have two films here. Basically, the two of them have the same contrast. Because if you draw this, the straight line, the slope of this graph, and the slope of this graph, you're going to have the same slope, maybe slope of 1.5 all over wherever. But the their speeds are different. You can see a shift from here to here. For this spin, we have an OD plus OD 1.0 plus and base plus fog for this. For this one, we use an exposure of around 0. Maybe 0.9. But for this one, for it to give us an optical density of this value, maybe 1 point and something, 1.2 or so, we have to use about 3 milliröntgen of exposure. So you can simply see that this one required lesser exposure level to this. So for this screen A, this is screen A, and this is screen B. This one has the faster speed. This first one here, it has a faster speed than the one here. So if you see a curve like this, of course they have the same gradient. The one towards the right, the one towards the right has the lower speed, or the ones here has the faster, higher speed, because this one is going to use a particular, um, a lesser amount of radiation to achieve the particular optical density. Whereas this one is going to give use an extended amount of exposure to give that same optical density. Throughout that curve, you're going to see the same thing. If you look at, we are looking at an optical density of 2. This one is going to use something like around 1 milliröntgen, whereas optical density of 2, this one is going to be using around maybe 7, 5, 7, around 6 milliröntgen. So a shift to the right of the OD curve signifies a change in the speed, that is in the speed moving from a higher value to a lower value. As that about the optical density in relation to speed of a film. So the speed of a film has got to do with the amount of photon, amount of exposure that a particular film will use in getting a, a predetermined optical density. If a particular film uses a lesser amount of exposure in getting a particular optical density, a predetermined optical density, then you say that film has a better sensitivity than the one that uses much more radiation. We actually use this in angiography. Doing some hard studies in which you need is a film that has a very, very high speed because it will be able to process the able to capture the image faster. We need that because of the movement of the heart. We don't need introduction of a kind of emotion artifact. You don't want emotion artifact in that film. So you go for high speed film. maybe 800 film speed, and so on and so forth, are going to give us a very, very a good image, because we want to maximize the time without those hard stuffs. So if it were possible, when one is doing a chest radiograph, it is usually advised, if we can, just to use a film that has a better speed, a very, very good speed. Because at times, even though you tell the patient to remain still, the radiographer tells the patient to remain still, the involuntary actions of the heart will still contribute to some kind of emotion artifact. So if you use a faster film screen system in that particular exposure, one is bound to have a very good image. Okay. And again, when we are talking about contrast, there is something, I think it has to do with the latitude. That is the range for which a particular film can permit. A film that has higher, let me share this screen with you, latitude. I think I need to mention that. Latitude also have sorry, that's I have that. Okay. Okay. We have two films here. The OD curve of two films. We have the first film, film A, and the other one, film B. I'm actually using film for the film screen system. When I say film, I actually mean the film screen system, because this film we are using have been sandwiched between two screens. So latitude this first one, you can see this A has a steeper slope. That is, it has a better contrast with respect to B. But look at the latitude of A. The latitude of A is from here to here. The latitude has got to do with the range of values, the range of exposure that will give us a very good film. That is a very good quality film. That's for A. But for B, which has a lower contrast, the one that has lower contrast has a better latitude. You can see the latitude from above 3 to close to 30. So if you can if you do an imaging with exposure, with a camera or exposure, camera of around 4 gray and so on to around 20 something gray, you're still going to have a very, very good film. But for this, the range is just very small. The latitude is small, just around 10 plus or minus 10, maybe plus or minus 2, maybe around 8 to 15 microgray. So this one has a very small latitude. So if we want to compare film that have a different latitude, we also want to look, you have two films that have a different contrast. Of course, contrast has got to do with this slope here. This one has a better contrast, but that is not only what we are looking at. Even if it has a better contrast, we want to look at the latitude. If the latitude is far more outweighs the benefit of the contrast, then we will go for the ones that have lower contrast, but yet bigger latitude, so that we will avoid the issue of retakes. If, for example, you take this first film, which has a very good contrast, and we use it in the radiography, it is possible we now use an exposure of less than we use an exposure of less than maybe around 5 or so. If you do that, you are not going to have a very good something here, because there is something what we have obtained might just be towards the toe end of this OD curve. And if you now have something greater than 10, maybe around 15, 20, we're not going to have anything from that. So latitude, so contrast is not only what we should look out for in the film, we also want to look at the latitude of that film. That is, contrast is not only what we want to look at, we want to look at the latitude of that film. If the film has got a very, very big latitude, then it is well and good compared to the one that has smaller latitude. But if the latitudes are closer to one another, then we go for the one that has a better contrast. That is A, as the case may be here. Now, one thing we've got to do, we have to know about a screen film. We shouldn't combine screen and different screens. We have one particular screen here. We now bring another film, and of course, that is not permitted. We don't combine film and screen. No, we don't do that here. We don't manufacture films here. So assuming we manufacture film here, and we go and get screen from another company, it is not advisable unless the manufacturer has specified that you can use this particular film from this company for our screen, and so on and so forth. And mind us, films are manufactured in only very few companies in the world because of the high purity expected of that industry. Just very few companies. And as we all know, the whole world is going digital. So in a few years' time, they will all go into extinction, and Nigeria will have no course. I will have no other option but to follow the trend. Then one other thing we need to know about film before um, we go to something else is reciprocity law. It just tells us that the exposure, the OD is usually constant for a particular range of exposure. The OD has got to remain constant for a particular range of exposure. That's the relationship between optical density and exposure. It has to be constant. That is the OD. You have a particular OD, no matter the range of exposure, the OD has got to remain constant. That is, the OD range has got to remain fairly constant. Of course, this is not going to be, we're not going to, it is not, it is almost impossible to have it at a particular value. But fairly enough, the reciprocity law states that the OD has got to be fairly constant for a range of exposure. When we now have the OD becoming lesser or greater than a particular range of exposure, then we now say we have the reciprocity law failure. So this is also very, very important, very, very important. Let me share a particular um, screen with us to further highlight that. Um, Reciprocity. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't think it's there anyway. But what the law is telling us that the relationship between OD and exposures should be constant. These are exposure for this is OD. That is, you have this kind of the range from here to here gives us a fairly constant OD because fairly constant. But if we begin to go down here, we now have reciprocity law of failure. This law is usually, we use it especially when we want to look at some very delicate system like a mammography. For mammography, if you are using a particular thickness of breast, maybe 4.5 centimeter thick breast, and one now encounters a very, very dense breast, one will automatically have to increase the dose to that breast by increasing the exposure. And when that happens, you're going to have, because of this, the OD is going to reduce. It's going to reduce because you have actually preset a particular OD you want to achieve. So you're going to have a reduced OD. So in that case, this is usually a problem in mammography. So this graph will actually lead us to that problem. Always tell us that this is a problem. Then we now have to look at a way about it. This is usually a problem when we encounter dense breast. Also, on this low exposure area, you might have OD, you might have a departure from this reciprocity law in the low exposure range of that particular technique or that particular exposure. If you have the low in this low region area, you're going to have a departure from this law, and in this high exposure area, you're going to have a departure from this law. So that tells us that we shouldn't go too low in exposure, and we shouldn't go too high. So this is a kind of quality assurance for us to tell us that don't go beyond here and don't go beyond here. Then if you look at our graph and we have gone beyond here, all we need to go do is to go back and look at what we have done. What have we done well for us to have this type of a graph? This is used for check during quality assurance. Oh, it's almost time. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. I think we just need to be fast. Now I want to look at the contrast and dose in radiography. Contrast and dose in radiography. There are so many factors we want to look at. There are so many factors that contribute to differences in contrast and the differences in dose in radiography. Exposure time is one of them. Exposure time, thickness of the patient is a factor. Thickness is going to mean that we use more dose to obtain a particular optical density. Exposure time has got to do with the contrast. The more the exposure time, the better the contrast, because exposure time is related to the amount of the amount of this we are using, the amount of X-ray photons we are using. The KVP is also a factor there. This one has got to do with the energy of the photon. How deep can this penetrate? At lower KVP, we have better contrast. But at higher KDP, we have not a wonderful contrast. So there are so many things. MBS is also MBS, some systems that have um, MA and S together have an MAS. And apart from that, also have systems that have MA differently and time differently. So these some of the factors that can affect contrast and those in radiography. So many of them, and of course, and um, the experience of the technologies, the experience of the technologies is also key. So us having a very good contrast and a very good dose distribution. Something we call a technique and chart, which is a particular chart that tells us that maybe for a patient of this mass, you're going to use these exposure parameters, KDP of a 70, MES of this and this and that and that and that. Or with experience, with so much experience, one does not need this always, but it is good that it is pasted on the radiographers maybe near the console so that the one can always look at it and then adjust the parameters as the case may be. And then scatter the radiation. Oh, this is 955. Scattered radiation. Scattered radiation, of course, is a problem in radiography and want to reduce it as much as possible. We have mainly two methods of reducing scattered radiation in radiography, general radiography. Another use um, agree or we use air gap and use grid or air gap. And we come to grid. Grid is just particular just a horizontal pattern that has got a space in between some lead and string. You have some lead material here. So if you have so many rays coming in so many directions, it's only the ones along this parallel to this what you go through. All other ones not parallel to it will be intercepted by this lead and stream. So this helps us to reduce scatter the radiation, but at the expense of those, because um, assuming you have around 20 X-ray photons that will have passed to um, to the patient, because of the presence of grid, you might not just have around 5 photons. So because of this, and you have set the machine using AEC. So this one might not be efficient in forming the particular optical density you want. So because of that, this one, the AEC will activate that machine to get more exposure. So it is going to lead to more exposure. So grid is actually a veritable way of using scatter. Of course, we know that the major form of the cause of a scatter is the Compton scattering. So we have a grid ratio, and this is the height, and then we have these are the width. And grid ratio is simply H over W. The grid ratio is the ratio of the height over width. So the greater this ratio, the better the scatter rejection. So that is, if this one becomes higher, it means that the scatter this one will get will be much more. That is the reduction as of the scatter into the detector will be highly increased because it will intercept so many X-ray photons not parallel to this space. So this grid ratio is actually is just H over W. And while the grid frequency is the number of these bands per um, per length of this ratio of this grid, that is the number of these bands. Some grid ratios, some bands may have this same band, may have less. At least this space here is a lesson of the same H. That gives us a grid frequency. So grid frequency is a number of these lead bands per unit length of the grid material. Okay, so I have some diagrams to show you that what we can find is another thing we have to look at is the Bucky factor. Bucky factor. It's the ratio of the entrance dose without grid. Dose without grid all over those with the grid in place. That is the entrance dose. Entrance dose without grid all over entrance dose. Entrance dose with grid all over entrance dose without grid. Entrance. So get this value. You get the value of the entrance dose when you have the grid there. You also remove the grid and you want to get the entrance dose. But this is going to give us a value. So the value it gives us is the Bucky factor. You measure the entrance dose when the grid is not there. Then you place the grid there in between the patient and you get the entrance dose. That gives us the Bucky factor. This one has got to do with it tells us how efficient that grid is in removing scatter. If you have a high, if you have a high, this 10, this 10 one, I think I will just maybe let's just try and I think we have almost finished next thing next. Just a film processing, which I feel we can actually read up the film processing steps. Of course, the film has got to be processed. The film has got to be processed. There are so many steps involved in film processing. The first one is, of course, the exposure of the film itself. The exposure of the film itself. When a film is exposed, as the screen film, when it is exposed, of course, we have a silver ion giving us silver plus an electron. The silver atom. Silver will not be precipitated. We now have our electron. This is the silver in the silver iodide. I mean, our silver bromide, which is in ionic form. You now have exposure. You now introduce the X-ray beam inside it. It goes into that silver bromide tabular granule and attaches and removes one electron from it. It reduces it into silver, which will now go to a particular. I don't have so much time here. I don't know. I don't want to rush this, but anyway, we can briefly go through this during our next lecture. But then, just for us to know the special steps involved. The first step has got to do with exposure. The second step has got to do with development. Development. The exposure here gives us a latent image which we can't actually see. When you have about 3 to 5 or about around 3, 4, 5, 10 silver atom, which go to the sensitivity center. That is the what we call a sensitivity center in a particular grain. Then, when the number of a silver atom have reached up to 3, 4, 5 per grain, then we are going to have the latent image, which you can see with the eyes. During the development stage, we now have a further reduction with developer solution, which will now act as this one will now act as a catalyst. The first one here, not a latent image site, will not act as a catalyst. If you don't have that latent image site, you're not going to have any development, no matter what you do. Like in some reactions we have in chemistry, some reactions can never occur without the presence of a catalyst. So this sensitivity center, which must be present there to absorb, to reduce some silver atom, maybe 3, 4 silver atoms, then got to be there for us to be able to have this development. After development, the thing is this one is actually a basic solution. We need rinsing to remove this development before the next process of fixing. Fixing and development, they are the major processes we do during film development, during the process of film processing, development, and fixing. Fixing is just the opposite of this. This one uses a very basic solution, whereas this one uses an acidic solution. But this reason has got to be there so that if we don't rinse this one in flowing water, freeze out this developing chemical to affect this fixing will just come and neutralize this one here. The one here, the acid, the base here, we also neutralize this fixing agent here. So the fixing agent will no longer be very, very effective in fixing. And after that, we have drying, washing, which removes this fixing chemical, and then our drying. I think I have to go more on this during and next lecture because there are some very, very salient points that we need to actually treat. But then, if we have time, we might go into some little artifacts that we encounter during film processing, and also some little quality assurance that we might need to do. But if not, we can actually ask us to go and read them up because they are something we can, they are good read, they are easy read for us. So at this point, I think I want to call it a day to our next lecture, which I feel might come up on Thursday because on Wednesday we have somewhere. We'll be sent to go somewhere for kind of a quality control in a hospital. It's not in the UCH actually. I'm going to take almost a whole day journey, going and coming. So it might be coming very late in the night. I might not be able to have it that on Wednesday. It should be a very good day to have it. So we'll probably have our next lecture on Thursday. So we'll go on the group and discuss further on that. So at this point, I want to say if you have any questions to ask, you can actually ask our questions if you have any. If not, I will assume you have played the question maybe for the next lecture. Any questions? Okay. I want to believe we don't have any questions. Can you actually hear me? I hope I've been. I've been communicating. Okay, okay. I can't hear you. I think somebody is trying to talk. Dr. Ilori. Ah,
Yeah, we can hear you.
Dr. Fati, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, sir.
Okay, okay. I think Dr. Lori, it might be from your system. Okay. I want to call it a day. We'll continue, like I said, on Thursday. So maybe probably quickly go through these film processing steps and
Same.
we'll go to our next lecture, which I believe should be mammography. So until then, I want to say, I want to wish us all a good night rest. Okay,
Thank you, sir.
you're
Good
welcome.
night, sir.
You're welcome. If you have any question, you can always drop them on our group page. If you have any questions, you can
Okay.
always drop them on our group page, and I'll do well to maybe do a voice answer or a video answer, anyone, as the case may be. So let us always drop our questions, and of course, there might be other our classmates or classmates or whatever that might have answers to such a question. I want to advise us to always do that if you have any questions. So once again, thank you very much. We continue on Thursday.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.